Just want to say thank you for everyone joining today. This is part one in a three-part series related to data that we have aggregated from Flavor Cloud's proprietary data. The first part that we're going to be talking about today is the consumer insights section. The next part that will be coming will be a tariff-specific section that we are focused on, and that will be released in the June timeframe. And then we will be releasing one part that is specifically related to shipping, customs holds, delays, those sort of things. So stay tuned for more information. This is part one. I'm really excited to be here today to talk to you with our two presenters, Rathna Sharad and Maia Benson, who are going to be walking through a lot of these results. So first, if you have not met or worked with Rathna and Maia, they have incredible backgrounds and have incredible insight on this topic. Let's start with Rathna, who is our CEO and co-founder here at Flavor Cloud. She has had 20 plus years in the cross-border industry and is a wealth of knowledge as it relates to tariffs and trade compliance. She has built cross-border products from scratch, built the technology around that, and will be here to provide a lot of great context for you today. We have Maia Benson here, who is our Chief Business Officer as well. Maia grew up in cross-border at Pitney Bowes and then went on to lead that at Shopify. So also brings a tremendous amount of background and experience here. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Rathna and Maia to talk through the results of the survey. So Rathna.
Hey folks, super excited. This is pretty revolutionary to actually have a state of the cross-border report. So I'm super thrilled because the Flavor Cloud is about 7+ years old, and a lot of what you're going to hear is reflective of the kind of capability that we built. We're the largest cross-border network of carriers, that's 300 plus, with an anywhere-to-anywhere network, which basically means we are importing into the entire world. That's 220 plus countries. And that means customs network that goes alongside that carrier network. And at each of those points, we're capturing data, which is really exciting reason why we're able to present a lot of these insights. The data is being leveraged in a lot of different ways. We use that for consumer insights and optimization at the checkout. We also use that for optimization in terms of dynamic pricing and determining carriers. We use that to inform merchants on, what should their optimization strategies look like. So hopefully you'll kind of get a view of that in terms of this data that we're sharing today. I should also add that this is the first of 3 reports that you will see from us, from the Flavor Cloud team. There's a lot of data and insights that it needed to be categorized into 3 parts. This particular report and the insights that we're going to drill into is focused on consumer insights. We'll be following up with tariff details in the next one, because you'll have a lot more insights as we're still gathering data as it relates to May and the changes that have happened most recently. And then you'll have a third report that really goes into more of the network insights and how that can inform strategies as well. So what does this mean? It means that we have expertise with over 100 million GMV that's gone through our platform, 500 plus brands across all CPG consumer goods categories, if you will. And there's over 80 plus data points that we've leveraged for these insights.
Rathna, we're really excited to really launch the first of its kind set of insights for cross-border. I just want to encourage this smart audience that we have today. If there's any data sets you guys are missing or you'd like, we'd really welcome the feedback, right? So we're launching V1. It will only get better next year. So thanks so much for sending us the data lenses that you're interested in seeing as well.
Absolutely. So why is this important? Just want to set the context as well. Cross-border is growing. And if you look at 31%, this is the average that we see, that merchants are expecting to see their cross-border volume at. Now, I think Shopify came out with the data as well for Q1, and it's exactly the same. So really, thinking about why is international important, because brands really are living in a connected world. And that means understanding your consumer, no matter where they are, they're resonating with the brand and they have the same type of expectations of cross-border, because it doesn't matter if you're shipping from China or you're shipping from Italy or India or wherever, or to those locations. The expectations of the consumer are that it is very much like a domestic shipment. That means everything is predictable at checkout. It's super easy. You convert easily, and that once the order is placed, it is fast. It's affordable or even free shipping, and it's all the way through. You don't see any of the customs clearance issues or the fact that it needs to go through multiple hops to get to you. It's just a super easy and expedited experience for them in terms of transit times. So that's what we're seeing and why this is important as a context. Okay. So a few key predictions that we wanted to share before we actually dive into the data. There is going to be tariff instability. I think you guys have seen it. It is a lot of back and forth. We're right now looking at China tariffs coming back down to the 30%. And what does that mean? When does that happen? How does that get applied? All of those things are top of mind, obviously, for a lot of you. This has very significant implications for most brands that we work with. And it's not just China. It's not just the US and tariff. It is really the tariff volatility is something we're going to see on an ongoing basis. It might be for different countries, different lanes, but really everyone wants a piece of the tax revenue. And so we expect this to be an ongoing thing, not just well beyond the immediate tariff instability that we're seeing. So it's here to stay. Second, we're seeing decentralized supply chains. So we're starting to see a trend where it used to be that brands, when they reached 100 million GMV, would start looking at, what are the core markets we need to look at where we have a much more regionalized presence. But we're starting to see that even before the tariff volatility, we started seeing it at about 25 million GMV. And now we're starting to see more reason for understanding your overall supply chain and decentralizing it if it makes sense for like EMEA or APAC, for example. So that is one of the trends we're going to be certainly watching, supporting, enabling. So that's something to keep in mind. Then the next is carrier diversification. So there are some very specific things that we saw. Canada Post, for example, it happened during the holidays. The strike, there's also talks of that happening right now. There were implications because of tariffs where certain carriers like DHL, for example, had blocked shipments over 800 USD, and then they turned it back on. So there are going to be a lot of different implications. Outside of that, do carriers have the capability? So, for example, postal networks are being hit hard with the tariffs, and there's going to be alternate carriers that come and go because of consolidation or going out of business or not having the right performance. So all of that means that a multi-carrier dynamic environment is going to be critical for success. We're going to see continue to see a lot of changes in that space. And finally, we talked a lot about growth, overall growth. We saw the 31% average, and really a lot of brands are looking at what should that be higher for them. But one of the biggest trends we'll see, and we have the data that we can walk through as well, is that all markets are in play. It's really about, how do you leverage data across the 220 countries around the world, have the ability to test, learn, and then optimize who are the best markets, what are the best regions, how do you want to then go spend marketing dollars, perhaps on the ones that are the best conversion for you, or even make decisions around decentralized supply chains. So these are the key themes that we are seeing and predicting for the year.
So consumer demand is still there all around the world. E-commerce globally has been democratized. It's very accessible. Global social influencer marketing is only growing to keep us interconnected. We're just seeing some material shifts in how and the level of complexity that merchants are going to have to navigate to reach this growing demand. So we're very bullish still on demand growth, and we just see some new hurdles and some solves that merchants are going to have to put in place to be resilient and access that demand at highly affordable prices.
Mm-hmm.
Rathna, you got it?
No, I was trying to
speak.
think Rochelle has it.
Are you seeing the tariff volatility slide right now?
Yep.
Awesome.
Rathna, do you want to take the slide?
Can't seem to move it along.
Okay, but maybe I'll just jump in, Rathna, and feel free to add. We've got a rapidly changing environment. Anybody that started to read the news really started in Mexico in December through Q1 and present here in May has seen all of the new regulations being released that have increased tariffs. What COVID did to make the consciousness around what is supply chain is what Q1 2025 has done to raise the consciousness around tariffs. We are seeing impacts to shopping cart conversion. So you will see data from us in a few slides. So growth is happening, but we can highlight where we are seeing negative tariff impact on conversion. Tariff data impacts, just a gentle reminder on the scope of our data, are through Q1. So you won't see April, May data in this data that we'll start to report out. And then as Rochelle and Rathna have said, this is Chapter 1, Consumer Insights of a 3-part data series. Chapter 2 will be deeper dives into the Q1 tariff impact, and that will be put out in June.
Yeah, so one thing I want to add here, I do see the slide now. So impacts to shopping cart, I think, is one of those really important aspects. There's 2 reasons why you're seeing the impact to shopping carts. One is wholesale, so prices, price change is something that we're seeing because there's implications to margin because of the new tariffs on imports from Chinese origin goods essentially coming into the US. So Brands that have had price increases obviously see an impact to conversions. And then the second reason we see impacts to conversion is also because of reciprocity tariffs. So specifically, a country like Canada, where there's a 25% tariff that's in effect. And that certainly has an implication. We'll also talk about some mitigation strategies there that we'll get into, but that's the thing to note really around the conversion. So key findings. So on this, I think one of the first things to think about is expanding the market. We always recommend, because Flavor Cloud really has the capability to provide the data and insights to let you make decisions across all of these countries. And the network can support DDP capability, delivery duties paid model that allows you to really test and learn all markets. Expanding, those that expanded to all markets, really rest of the world, saw greater growth and were able to grow faster, was one of the findings. Second is health and wellness, a clear winner. There's been significant demand and growth in that segment. And it's a vertical that has done very well over the last 2 years. I'd say has seen the most remarkable growth, and you'll see that in our results. Product classification is absolutely critical for the tariff and regulatory shifts. So this really means that accuracy is super important. Getting to the 6-digit, the last 2 digits of the 6 represent the composition, so essentially the material, that is critical. And getting to the 10-digit, which is very specific to the import country, is very important. If you don't get to that specificity, then the tariffs could be off completely, or tariffs may be applied that you didn't expect would be applied. So there's many different implications there that we're seeing. Then we talked a little bit about mitigation strategies, but localized market pricing, if you leverage that, so that really means that, let's say a product is $80 and landed cost, inclusive of tariffs, is $20. If you then into a country, let's say like Canada, and you had the product price at $100, that actually created much better conversions than splitting out the landed cost separately. So strategies like that, where you have product pricing that's based on historical data sets and intelligence, we see that merchants have had a lot of success implementing that to mitigate the impacts of tariffs. Then the next one to take away is that regional consumers' behaviors are very different. This is, again, about data and insights, really understanding not just region, but even at a country level. Perhaps you understand that for example, the Middle East is a very big market for you. And then you may start optimizing at the country level, really thinking about, how do you provide a localized experience, conversion rules, different types of optimizations, or even shipping rules that are different. And then finally, emerging markets. There are markets outside of the stronghold. Typically, we think of, especially for US merchants, but really even global merchants, looking at Canada, UK, and Australia as the core markets is often how optimization is done. But really what we see is that emerging markets are growing at a faster pace and are really strong expansion opportunities. It obviously depends by vertical as to what resonates with consumers, but that's the insight you can see in this report as well.
I think one other consumer insight that we take for granted that's worth highlighting is When you can offer no risk at checkout to your consumers by guaranteeing all the duties, taxes, and import fees that will need to be paid at checkout, that builds a tremendous amount of trust, takes the risk off the consumer. And so putting those guarantees, those promises in checkout is also a fantastic lever for conversion.
Okay, so that brings us to the growth. This is average of 76% year-over-year growth for a cohort of customers across Flavor Cloud. And that's really exciting because one of the things that we saw, and I'll give you, a post COVID, we saw that international became like the number one strategy for growth because oftentimes brands were looking for how do I augment any kind of softness or with other growth and do it fairly easily. And that is where we saw tremendous growth year over year. Even during domestic softness, which exists in, let's say, the US, or there's different types of implications like the government changes that we're seeing. And we often see that brands start looking at global markets and have success. And that's what this data is really telling us. So regardless of recessionary concerns, while domestic e-commerce didn't grow as much, international did grow. And that's because they had a really wider net and looked at the global scope. And oftentimes what is regionalized doesn't impact these other countries. Call outs here in terms of the fastest growing. You have the three countries here, UAE, New Zealand, and Singapore. Again, we talked about emerging markets, new markets. These were the fastest growing, some incredible growth of 198% with UAE. While you see that the top markets saw more tempered growth, if you will. Australia and UK actually grew quite a bit, but you can see that the emerging markets are way faster in terms of growth. And one other thing I wanted to add on that is that if you look at a lot of the e-commerce data, the countries like India and China and APAC and Middle East are growing at a much faster pace in general. There's a lot more growth in those markets, while these markets like the US or UK, Australia tend to be more mature markets, and so they're not growing as much. And so that is also reflected in the numbers that we see. Next, please. Yeah, and we did want to call out the ones that saw the least growth, and one of those more mature markets is France.
Okay. Let's go one layer deeper into the specific industries that are driving growth. As you heard Rathna say clearly, health and wellness continues to explode around the world, right? So health and wellness products that are made in countries with high regulations for the inputs, quality control that goes into these products are benefiting mostly because they are high trusted set of ingredients and brand. And we've seen just a tremendous explosion for those countries that have those regulations supporting the efforts. Beauty and cosmetics continues to realize extremely strong growth. What's great about these two columns in a world where we're living in with recessionary chatter, these two are pretty recession-proof categories. So exciting to see that growth, and also through these kind of unstable, unknown times. Apparel and fashion grew. We just are starting to see it grow less fast, if you will, than some of these other categories. So that's some insight and some breakdown on growth by industry.
And I will add on apparel. One of the things that's impacting growth there, that we think is happening here is certainly was impacted by tariffs the most. So a lot of apparel is manufactured in China, and so there were implications there as pricing was impacted, as well as we see that again, it is a more mature category, one that should certainly be leveraging localized market pricing more.
Top product categories, if we look around the globe at a regional basis, North Americans are buying essential oils, perfume, apparel, wellness. So think mainly US and Canada consumers here. In the EU, there's a lot of skincare, again, wellness, essential oils and perfumes. Asia's apparel, including leather goods, and then wellness. Middle East, food and wellness. Africa, apparel, leather, and more apparel. So a lot of apparel happening in Africa. And then last but certainly not least, in Latin America, we've got a lot of apparel, including leather goods. So that's what consumers around the world, when they look to cross-border brands, tend to buy.
So two things of note here. One is that consumers are looking for things that they cannot get within their own country. So these are the types of brands that they're willing to pay to ship across the borders, and they are really resonating with the brand. So it's really important that that connection is what's driving that. And we'll talk a little bit about lifetime value and retention and all of that as well. But that certainly plays into the behavior. The second piece to note here is all consumer goods categories are at play. One of the most interesting insights, having been in cross-border for so long, is over the last 10 years, I've kind of, personally seen it go from apparel, accessories, footwear to a much broader set of categories. So everything from obviously food, supplements, there's newer home goods categories, but really everything, including mattresses, in terms of consumer goods, is now cross-border friendly. So really, it is a testament to how connected we are in terms of global demand.
And the democratization of e-commerce from a tech perspective, the democratization of global payments. So we've just seen the world open up and make it easier for merchants to sell, to be born anywhere and sell everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
So we actually got a really interesting question here about specifically, they're saying we're seeing this great growth in beauty, which is great, but are there any issues with shipping dangerous goods to some of these locations that we're showing here?
Yeah, that's a great question. So because it was specific to beauty, I would is that about perfume, which is typically the DG category that we work with and also ship. So there are very specific implications for moving limited or accepted quantities, which is what this would qualify as if it was perfume, on airplanes. So air network, there's very specific regulations. This is IATA regulations, and that needs to be met with. And that is something that requires expertise in terms of the 3PL that is able to handle DG and get certification. There's very, very stringent guidelines on how you ship, and there are very specific carriers that we enable for DG. But we do support them. It is a restricted commodity and needs to follow these guidelines and work with specific carriers for specific lanes.
Thank you.
Average order value by region, we heard the Middle East earlier was exploding in terms of growth. They also, what's partly fueling that is a high average order value. If I look at this in sum total, hopefully what's striking everyone from a merchant perspective, from a 3PL or a shipper perspective, is how high these values are. So in Europe, even at $89.72, when you sell cross-border, your average cart value, your average order value, by the way, this excludes shipping and duties and taxes. So this is SKU only average order value, is higher than your domestic business. So, whilst democratization of commerce platforms, payments, providers like Flavor Cloud democratizing logistics and compliance help sellers and 3PLs hit the easy button on this front. What's clear to me is the return is much higher than what you'll see for domestic cart values.
Yeah, and the average on that is around 20% higher that we see across the platform.
Okay, thank you. Conversion rate by region. So if we look at Australia, New Zealand, at a 20% average conversion rate being the highest, North America, US, and Canada being second highest. Then you've got Europe and Middle East tied, followed by Asia and LATAM. So what we're really seeing here is a fantastic buyer set, and we saw this in earlier data in Australia and New Zealand with high demand and high conversion for brands and products that aren't born in Australia or New Zealand. This is customer retention by region. So this is repeat buyers, consumers by region. I think what's obvious that stands out to everyone is US and Canadian consumers have a high propensity to stay loyal and repeat their purchase, as does Latin America, right? So highly trusted consumers that are loyal and that keep coming back for more of your product. So those are the two that really jump out to me.
Yeah, and this is a really fascinating statistic. This is one I love a lot because acquiring customers, customer acquisition cost, is a big concern for brand, right? And so if you can build lifetime value through repeat customers, that means that they obviously are loyal to the brand, but also that the buying experience was really friction-free, that they want to come back and buy more. And that's really exciting. Especially exciting to see LATAM being one of those highest in terms of repeat customer purchases, because Latin America actually has the most restrictive import guidelines, and it has very stringent customs and compliance regulations. So the fact that we're making that really friction-free through, say, a DDP process is why I think we're seeing higher repeat purchases, and that's pretty exciting to see.
So democratizing the compliance here has really unleashed that market, and they're proving to be loyal consumers.
Yeah.
Okay, next we'll look at country. So we just talked about regions on the slide before. Now let's break this down at a country basis. And again, I think what stands out from my perspective is Canada underneath North America's got a high retention rate, as does the Netherlands sitting in the EU, as does CH, which is Switzerland, as you can see on the upper right-hand side of the slide. So these within those regions are the countries for which we see the highest retention rates. Now we're gonna look at Q1 together, folks, as a little bit of a preview to the second chapter of our data set coming out in June, and talk through what we've seen in Q1 since all the tariffs have come to light and into effect around conversion rates by industry, right? So I think what's clear here is kind of the biggest change or the biggest impact, and Rathna alluded to this earlier, is really sitting in apparel and fashion that used to have at the beginning of the year 13% conversion rate that's now dropped to 8%. I think she mentioned this earlier. A lot of the impact on these conversion rates have been around the reciprocal tariffs. So if you've had made in the USA products going into Canada, for example, there's a 25% Canadian levered import tariff. So that the apparel and fashion world is what we've seen have the most impact, followed by beauty and cosmetics, 18 to 14, followed then by health and wellness from 23 down to 20. Consumer goods in general have stayed pretty flat. But we are, these are, negative tariff conversion Q1 impacts, again, most affecting apparel and fashion. On that, I'll reiterate what I just mentioned. Made in the USA got a reciprocal tariff, I believe it was in late February, early March, from Canada of 25%. So made in the USA, doesn't matter if it's made in China going into Canada, it's made in the USA going into Canada, has hit the lowest or had the biggest impact on conversion, which has been up to about 30%.
And this is one that we're measuring, obviously, and continuing to measure, but also one that we see can be mitigated with a localized pricing strategy. So certainly one of the mitigations that we recommend.
And just so everyone knows what localized pricing strategy means, it literally means taking import duties, taxes, and fees and embedding it in a product price. So just want to kind of make sure everybody clearly understands what that means.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Rathna, to you.
Yeah. So what can you do to build resilience in this environment? And like I said at the outset, we can expect tariff volatility to continue in some shape, form, or the other. There's going to be obviously some, hopefully the 90-day reset is going to help. We're going to be watching closely on the US China tariffs, but there are other tariffs at play and other continuous evolution, if you will see, in this space. And because of that, there's resilience that needs to be built so that a business can think about future-proofing themselves for the next big event, whatever that might be. And one of those things is investing in what I call the basics. And the tech stack and the capability to really say that no matter what happens or when it's really a matter of when it happens, that you're able to really thrive and seamlessly, continue evolving the business. And one of those things, and we've called out some very specific things here to consider. One is accurate product classification. We talked a lot about how that impacts tariffs, but it really impacts everything from how clearance happens, because a lot of what has changed is the expectation of what declarations need to look like when customs paperwork is received at the border. Now, this is true of other countries used to have these regulations even prior to the US instituting these changes. But ultimately, borders are becoming less porous, and the need for understanding what's coming into the border is really critical for governments. And that is why this is a necessity. It's not a nice to have, it really is important. The other implication is compliance is actually legal requirements. So being incorrect has repercussions, and that can have very significant implications to the brand. And so it's important to be accurate. Second, we talked a lot about localized market pricing. One of those very specific strategies in localized market pricing is leveraging, knowledge of landed costs, which is duties, tariffs, fees, all of the taxes, rolling that up into and coming up with a SKU-based pricing that will mitigate any kind of implications on the margin side for the brand, but also more importantly on the consumer side, offer a more seamless experience because the price is inclusive of all of it, and it actually boosts conversion when it's not broken out.
I also want to say we're seeing a lot of the smart brands leverage classification and estimation. What will the duties and taxes be data as they're thinking about product or SKU level configuration, right? So what do I make this thing of? What do I put into this thing? And what does that yield in terms of classification and therefore expected duties and taxes? So looking at that full unit economic, even before things are made, is what I see a lot of really proactive smart brands doing.
The third strategy is DDP. Now, this is really table stakes now. It has become because of multiple factors. One is obviously the tariffs. Nobody wants surprises. So getting a bill after the fact and a really fat one at that as a consumer is not a great experience. And it will lead to refusal of parcels, as we've seen. And the other aspect is if they do refuse, then you're dealing with abandonment and margin hits for the brand. In addition to that, it causes delays. I talked about declarations needing a lot more detail. So with not having DDP, you would use a delivery duties unpaid or the DDU model. That means that there's going to be additional customs delays and scrutiny. And that's the other reason why it can lead to a poor customer experience. So DDP has become pretty much table stakes now for success if you really think about international growth as a big aspect of your growth plan. The next, the fourth bullet here is really talking about the regional fulfillment or nearshoring, which I also called decentralized supply chain. This is the trend that I talked about at the outset, and that is something that brands should be considering for multiple reasons. It could be because of alternate sourcing locations that you may be looking at, because looking at alternate instead of China, we see brands looking at Vietnam and India and other options, or Colombia and Ecuador. So really thinking about alternate sourcing or multiple sourcing partners as well. That allows for competition. It allows for a more seamless transition should issues happen. And we're certainly seeing that aspect across several of our merchants. And then finally, dynamic pricing, routing intelligence. I think this is a really critical component as well. I talked about carrier diversification. It is something that even in domestic, it's really important that you don't rely on a single carrier. Again, another example that we saw recently was UPS. hiking rates. And also UPS MI, which is Mail Innovations arm that does international, was impacting a lot of customers. And those are the types of things that can, if you're relying on a single carrier, it really is a single point of failure. International, there's no single carrier that can be great at all weight breaks, commodities, countries, optimizations. And so really having a multi-pronged approach through a network is going to be critical for success. Regardless of how trade wind shifts, then you'll be able to automatically avail new pricing or have it seamlessly swapped for you. So that would be the last bullet. So I'll leave it there. Anything to add, Maya?
No, we're just seeing a massive shift to echo Rathna's point, whereby there are basically conveyor belts being constructive. Flavor Cloud is one of the sets of conveyor belts that exist between supply and demand. So instead of routing in the to-date world, everything from China to the US and then the US outbound, we're seeing China to Canada where my demand is, China to the EU where my demand is, right? And that can help localize inventory, drive the efficiency of scales of moving stuff through customs once. And so this is, I think, a really exciting shift, and fulfillment providers that have a global footprint and or are growing one, I think are going to be in a pole position to capitalize on helping their merchants in these ways.
All right. Excellent. Well, getting some good feedback in the chat from some of the attendees. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to put that in the Q&A section or in the chat, and we're happy to talk through that. We've got a lot of good questions kind of coming in directly to us as well right now. So the first one is we have an attendee who is struggling with customs. Their focus groups and research tells them that expansion into India and the Middle East will work well for their brand, but they need to figure out an appropriate solution in order to expand. What's your advice for them?
So work with a 3PL partner that would allow for that expansion. If you're a really small brand that's starting out, then I would say the default option with a platform like Shopify would be a great place to start. As you think about growth into specific markets, tools like Flavor Cloud can certainly help you optimize and really make sure that you're set up for the growth worldwide.
Yeah, give us a call. We'll be happy to help you kind of navigate how to unlock India from an infrastructure standpoint. So we'd love to talk there. I also want to say I was just calculating the world's largest e-commerce countries, so countries that buy the most in an e-commerce fashion. I think India is now up to number 5. So just tremendous, explosive demand growth in India. I think when I joined Shopify in 2016, it wouldn't have really candidly even popped up on our radar. So tremendous, exciting growth.
All right, we have another question that's just come in here. Are there any best practices and suggestions for direct-to-consumer companies doing more or less than 10 million in sales per year?
I think, the less than 10 million, Shopify is a great place to start. That's where a lot of brands see success, because what you're trying to do at that point is understand who your customer is, really establish your brand, what makes the brand tick. So it's a great place to start, and start expanding to rest of the world would be my next suggestion. So really, you don't know where your brand is going to resonate. So start with the rest of the world. And with tools like, Flavor Cloud, you can actually see data around where it's converting, what are, how your consumers reacting to the brand. Also understanding, what types of optimizations really can help scale in the top, let's say 3 to 5 countries, and then kind of decide on how you want to invest against those.
Excellent. All right, and it looks like we have one additional question, and that question is, based on what's happening with tariffs, how are you seeing brands' sourcing strategies change right now?
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of change. So first of all, sourcing is hard to switch without 6 months or so notice. It is one of those things that if you did not already have it planned, it's not something that you could have made a switch. So it really is about thinking about future-proofing your supply chain and thinking ahead of, how can you get resilient? And sourcing strategies is one of those things to get resilient. We did, however, see the ones that did make progress already on that were able to switch to other countries faster. So they switched to like Vietnam or India or other countries, and they were able to mitigate the impacts of tariffs in that way. But certainly looking at additional, sourcing partners or alternate sourcing partners was what we saw happen. And that was done with some success. That combined with a more agile, I think, fulfillment strategy helped mitigate. So even those that did not switch sourcing partners, if you didn't bring a lot of inventory in, and paid the enormous tariffs, but really brought, much more nimble, smaller drops of B2B through air network. That was one of the strategies that we saw as well. And that was good because you are kind of not paying duties upfront on a lot of inventory.
I think what we're seeing with brands is, given the tariff volatility that we believe is here to stay, not just now, but in the future, the smart brands are making sourcing evaluation and doing the math of what the other alternatives could be with ranges of tariffs that could be at risk is now the new name of the game, right? So it's a more formal pattern for brands and sellers to look at their sourcing on a much more frequent basis than they have before, given now we just live in this much more volatile, uncertain world. And full unit economics now get to include tariffs that have bands of ranges that could impact profitability. So I think the cycles of looking at sourcing options are accelerating and becoming more frequent and a standard for an annual planning motion.
Excellent. Thank you for the answers to those questions. Rathna, Maia, thank you for all of the context that you've provided for us today. I think everyone's looking forward to seeing the next editions of the State of Cross Border coming up soon. So for those of you who were here today, thank you for joining us. You will receive a thank you message with a link to the recording, as well as a link to the full report if you have not downloaded that yet. Feel free to reach out to us at Flavor Cloud. Just go to the flavorcloud.com, and we're happy to support you and provide any answers to any additional questions you might have. Thank you so much for joining us today, and this concludes our webinar.
Thank you.
Thank you.